Whoops, wrong button. Intro.
Welcome to HVAC Success Secrets Revealed, a show where we interview industry leaders and disruptors, revealing the success secrets to create and unleash the ultimate HVAC business. Now your hosts, Thaddeus and Evan.
Hey, welcome back to another HVAC Success Secrets Revealed with Thaddeus and Evan. We have good conversations with good people, and any good conversation worth having is worth having drunk. So cheers, gentlemen. John,
Cheers.
welcome.
Cheers.
Awesome.
Cheers. All right.
For those of you that don't know John Sherk, he is a brilliant human being. I'm very excited for today's conversation. I've been following you on YouTube and watching some of your videos on there. But John, he is from Operations Laboratory. He is the founder of that. He's been in consulting for 11 years. He is a Ph.D. in human capital development with a specific focus on HVAC techs. So we're going to be diving into what exactly that means and how it is that you could actually get a PhD in learning about human beings and HVAC techs, because my God, they're a fascinating species. John has a top-down focus, maximizing your efforts as an owner to make the most out of your business. John, welcome to today's show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So I got to ask, what does it mean to have a PhD in human capital development specifically for HVAC techs?
Well, here's the deal. The field is it's a business field, but it's specifically about human talent development and what it's worth in dollars. So it's kind of like measuring skills in dollars. And so, you go someplace like a big corporation and they want to spend $5 million on some leadership program. Well,
Right.
Are they getting anything back from it? How do you measure that kind of stuff? So that's the general field. And then for me, I mean, my all my life I've been connected to air conditioning. My grandfather was a Lennox tech in the 70s, driving an old green Dodge van doing residential stuff, and I used to ride with him, and I kept the thermos of water. And then my mother worked for Johnson Controls for 40 years. And but if you put a meter in my hand, only bad things are going to happen. So I went on a more academic path and got into the human capital field, and then I chose air conditioning as my dissertation topic.
Love it. That's amazing. And so why HVAC techs? Like, what was it about them? What was it that you discovered in going through that process? Obviously, having the background in HVAC makes a lot of sense, but what was it about the technicians that you found specifically fascinating, and why you wanted to study the measurement of their success?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously for personal reasons, it helps me feel like I'm staying in the family connection, the family business. But what also fascinated me about them was I was watching the unemployment rates keep getting lower and lower and lower before the virus happened. And I was watching, my oldest air conditioning client is 9 years running. So I've been watching his company for 9 years. And I was watching a shift happening as it became easier and easier for a technician to just go work anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to understand that dynamic better. And so, I mean, you want me to kind of go into it a little bit?
Yeah, let's do it. Go for it.
So this is true for everybody in all professions, but what I studied were air conditioning mechanics. Anybody who's working for a company, their commitment to that company has three components. There's a desire component, meaning they want to be there. There's a obligation component, let's call it, where they feel like there's a sense of fair exchange and loyalty from the past and so on. And then there's a component of it costs too much to leave, right? And so what we know from other studies is that the desire folks give you the most discretionary effort, and they think about leaving the least. And then the obligation folks are kind of in the middle, and the cost too much to leave folks give you the least effort and think about leaving the most, but they don't because it costs too much to leave, right? And then what I found is in the study, in the context of very low unemployment, that thing of costs too much to leave begins to vanish. Because as technicians, we're getting sign-on bonuses and people were throwing real money around to to get talent. I was with a group of supervisors, and we were talking about this topic about the same time I was doing this research. And I said, you guys realize you can work anywhere you want to. And one of the guys said, we took a break, and he came back in. He said, yep, you're right. I just called this other company, and they gave me they said, here's the truck you can have. Here's how much we're going to pay you. Come over here right now. Right. And so in that environment, what I found in the research was that the idea that it costs too much to leave kind of vanishes, except for companies that have very strong cultures. Mm-hmm. Because they did in the research, they did demonstrate they had a concern about it would cost them too much to leave because the culture, you can't buy that culture. They can't get that somewhere else. And so that's when I started talking about don't compete for labor with wages, compete with culture. Because you compete with wages sooner or later. If there's 25 HVAC companies in town, and you decide I'm going to be the guy who competes for labor by paying the most, well, then you're creating a cul-de-sac, and you're creating a workforce full of people that, if you pay an extra $4 an hour, it's only a matter of time until those techs have $4 an hour worth of bills more. Now they can't leave, and you're paying the most, and you're getting the least effort of anybody in town. So it doesn't make sense to compete. Now you got to be fair about it. You're not going to get a good tech for $10 an hour, but making the commitment and the investment in your culture will do more for you for retention and recruiting than competing on wages.
I love it. It's interesting because it's the same spectrum, but the opposite side of dealing with customers. In that if you discount your product over and over and over again, you end up just in a race to the bottom because you're competing on price. You're doing the exact opposite on the employment side, but you're going up and up and up. Both sides, you're losing profit.
Yep, that's right. That's right. I mean, if you said, well, what scenario would I want to have? Would I want to have fair wages and people who really want to work there, which is a culture thing, or would I want to say, I don't want to have to work to build a culture. I don't want to have to make those sacrifices, or I don't want to actually have to care about the people enough to have that kind of culture. Well, what you're going to have is the most expensive workforce who is the least engaged in giving you the least effort. I mean, it is what it is. Right. So,
well, let me ask you this. One of the things that fascinates me about anyone who's put the time in and the effort in to get their Ph.D., they're fascinated by research and really diving into that. So what were some of the commonalities that you noticed in the companies that had a really strong culture?
Well, let's see. It was clear that how do I say this? They talked about their culture. I mean, it was like they knew they had a good culture, and they openly talked about protecting it. And that they had spent years building it. And the companies that I studied, actually, they also were very heavy into fixed cost maintenance. And so in that environment, the fixed cost maintenance environment, the customer's paying one check per month. And if it breaks down, the HVAC company fixes it on their own dime, right? So it's super important that the maintenance is done well. Otherwise, you get compressor failures and whatnot, and you lose your profit, right? Well, what drives getting the maintenance done well is the culture. Otherwise, if you kind of half-ass a PM long enough, you're going to be buying a compressor. That's just how it is. Yep. So that they knew, not just because sometimes you hear about culture, and people who don't have a great culture, they see it as kind of a thing you ought to do. It's not their business strategy, though. They're not saying, like, this is how we make money. We have a great culture. But the people who have a great culture, they say this is how we make money.
Right. I love it. Thad, you've been awfully quiet, buddy. Got a question?
No, I've just been letting you guys run with it.
I love it.
I kind of do have a question, but I mean, I know that we've dropped, the top 10 things that HVAC owners should do, but most don't. I mean, one is stop competing for labor with wages, and we've already chatted about that. So of the 10, I mean, we don't have to necessarily go through all 10 today. I mean, we want to save something, for you and your book and where you're at, right? We don't want to give it all away. I mean, I could, but of the 10, what would you say is the most important one?
Well, there's a couple in there. Number 4 on the list, treat your business like a business, is pretty big. I would say of the HVAC companies I have worked with over the years, this is only true of a few of them. And so when I say treat it like a business, I'm saying, do you have a valuation of it? Do you know what it's worth in dollars? Do you know? Are you thinking about your exit? Like if when a client gets started with me, the very first thing we do is I put them through a kind of data gathering process that determines a valuation of their business, how sellable it is, how they're doing, and the things that drive the value of the business. And then we talk about what is your sort of freedom point in dollars. Like if you had, is it $4.2 million? Like what is the number? And then what really, even though, yes, we want to take care of their people. Yes, we want to, all the culture stuff, but it's a business and it's an investment. And there's so many people that it's their largest investment and they have no idea what it's worth. Right. So I would say treating your business like a business is pretty high on the list, and being able to think of it, because once you know what it's worth, you can, let's say a guy finishes the year and he made $500,000, right? If you're not really thinking of it as a business, you take that out, you pay taxes on it, and then you go put it into the stock market. You go buy Bitcoin or whatever, okay? But if you're looking at your business as an investment, you can take, let's say, half of that, $250,000, not pay taxes on it, reinvest it into the business with a targeted return, and let's say make 50% the next year on your investment, because you're handling your business as an investment, not just as a pass-through entity for income. Okay,
that's a key point.
Yeah, and along with it, a lot of people do this. If the business is smaller, don't treat the company bank accounts like your personal account. If you're not thinking about selling, then it's okay to do some. You got, the condo that's supposed to be for customers, but you use it downtown in New Orleans or whatever. But that it's okay to do that stuff. But there's going to come a time when it's going to be a problem, right? So just be aware that there's going to come a time when you have to clean that up. And then the other thing I would say that's part of treating it like a business is seriously consider paying the money for a third-party audit every year. If you want to be, among the serious business people, they all get third-party audits. And all that means is you get a third party, a CPA firm, to come in and they'll randomly select certain transactions and see if you handle it right. And then they'll tell you, no, you can't deduct this, like the new one this last year was entertainment is not deductible anymore, or if certain meals you can deduct theirs but not yours. Definitely no more. You can't get the football tickets and count those. Not in the U.S. anymore. How does?
Yeah, they eliminated golf in Canada, so
yeah, down here too. So just getting more professional so that you have an asset that has a value. Because in the U.S., I think there's probably also true in Canada, it's only about 20 or 25% of businesses that get put up for sale get sold for more than the value of the assets. And this is all the reason why, right? It's not an enterprise. It's just it's a complicated job with a lot of people doing a lot of stuff, but it's not a business yet. Okay.
Yeah.
So I would say that's right up there. Another one that in the air conditioning business in particular that I would really encourage anybody to look at is get into the maintenance business.
Point number 5.
Yeah. Maintenance is a very valuable. Well, I mean, I've watched my clients go through COVID and thrive. And 100% it's because they had maintenance contracts. I mean, my clients do, my current clients, except for one, do a lot of commercial and industrial comfort cooling. They don't do process work in an industrial plant. And down here in South Louisiana, there's 58 chemical and petrochem plants between Baton Rouge and about 100-mile stretch. So the bigger players in the market do industrial comfort cooling, and then they do bigger commercial school systems and that kind of stuff. And even though there was a lot of like flashy tech in the last year, these units that sanitize the air, and there's always some interesting new tech. It is old-fashioned coil cleaning, filter changing, routine, boring as hell, not sexy in the least, but man, does it keep your business stable. And I would add to that, when I've had techs ask me, I'd like to get started with my own business. Where would you start? I would say, as long as you have permission to use your truck, it's your own tools already, for the most part, go get some maintenance contracts. When you price out a maintenance contract, you should figure about a third of that for labor. So for every $100 worth you're charging on a maintenance contract, about $33 of that should go to labor, right? So do the math on that, figure out, if you say 1/3 of a work week is, let's say, 15 hours, get yourself 15 hours a week worth of maintenance billed at the proper rate, and then you can transition and have the time to do what you need to do to build your business and not have the massive scare of no income, right? Because if you want to get out there and get started, it's very up and down, because you like, thank God they want me to do a change out, and now I just made $4,000 or I made 10 grand or whatever. And then the phone doesn't ring for 3 weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maintenance contracts just stabilize your business. And I know it's boring and, keeping 30-year-old units up and running and all that stuff, but I would definitely look at that as recurring. Recurring revenue is a very important part of any business, but
It's
100%, it's essential. And I will circle back to the maintenance things, but I mean, in order to eliminate the ups and downs, guess what? Hire us. You get a good marketing plan in place. I mean, we can circle back to that a little bit in a second, but so somebody's saying, okay, and we heard the big industrial, parts of things. Those are good. You obviously have to have the level to be able to service those large petrochemical plants. So when we look at, let's say, residential maintenance contract, what are some ways that, from, I guess, a marketing / sales component, that a person can go out and get more maintenance agreements and get that MRR, or monthly recurring revenue?
Well, there's a couple of ways to go at it. I would say, for one, start working with somebody like you all. I mean, it's not going to be that effective to go into a neighborhood and just start knocking on doors. You need to have, probably, you guys know marketing better than I do, but I would say developing. Well, let me take a step back. That you guys know this stuff because you're marketers. No one in their right mind thinks their problem is that they don't have a maintenance contract. No customer, right? So if you're going to go get a maintenance contract, whether it's a commercial entity or a residential entity, you've got to make the connection between what their perceived problem is and your maintenance contract. And so if they say, when it gets hot in the summer, I need to know I'm going to call somebody and they're actually going to show up. Because one of the drivers, at least down here in South Louisiana, it's hot summer. And everybody's busy as heck all day long. And if you're not connected to somebody already in a contract, you have no guarantee anybody's showing up anytime soon, right? So there's a perceived problem, right? And then you say, well, this is how we solve this problem, is with a maintenance contract. So what we do is provide certainty. What we do is provide predictability. How we do it is a maintenance contract. And then folks like you all that are better at it than me have to work through, what does that mean on an inbound SEO kind of situation, or do I want to, how do I create an audience? So there's different ways to go at it depending on somebody's specific situation. This is one of the biggest things, I think, and I put this on my list: hold your marketing people accountable to make the phone ring. I've seen plenty of marketing firms that are basically just content creators, and their real function is to work with a company that has outside salespeople and make them look good, give them beautiful materials, give them beautiful content. But if you walk in the door and you say, dude, I need my phone to ring, they can't do that. They don't know how to create that movement. And so, and I've seen people in service businesses who have that kind of a firm, and they're frustrated. They're like, well, I can't tell if I'm getting what I should be getting out of them. They never make my phone ring. They make me look good on whatever, on a flyer or a billboard or something. But I have no idea what's going on here in terms of an ROI. And so having that conversation with your marketing people is just essential.
Well, and not only just getting the phone to ring, but is it the right people that are calling?
There you go.
Right? Like, yeah, we could set up a Facebook campaign that gets your phone to ring nonstop, but if it's the wrong customer, is that effective for you? Like, then you're just answering the phone all day, and that's not what you want to be doing as an owner, right?
Right.
No, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
In terms of building up the succession plan, because obviously maintenance agreements, that's huge for a succession plan. That's huge for selling. It adds to the valuation of the business. Like, all of these things are compounding on each other. What are some ways that you see the owner moving from that technician mindset and being that owner operator to then taking a step back, getting off the tools, getting people in place to start to take over that role?
Well, that is tough. If there's one spot where HVAC companies stop growing, it's with that hub and spoke business model.
Yep.
I would say probably that's the number one spot. And it's where the owner just can't, doesn't know how to let go, maybe doesn't know, let's take an average air conditioning company. We say, dad started the company, junior's a service manager, mom's doing the books, you got a set of trucks and a set of techs out there. And I mean, I have this conversation all the time. And I'm like, you need to have a management team. He's like, well, what would they manage? And it's like, well, you need somebody running the operation day to day so you can be outside, managing sales or selling yourself, or what, where do you want to go with it? And it just, that process, at some point you're hiring someone who's not billable. And that becomes a real barrier. And they just look at it as just, this is raw overhead. Why am I paying? What am I getting out of this person? Puts too much pressure on them too quickly to produce and add value, and then it kind of falls apart. So building out the management teams is, if you want to sell your company someday, you have to have management team. You have to. No one's going to buy your company if you are the hub and you just have spoke.
You have to be able to be removed from the business.
Yes,
100% in order to be able to have it as this. I mean, maybe not 100%, but a large portion of you has to be able to remove it. Can you leave, and can your business still function without you? It's the vacation test. If you went away for 2 weeks on vacation, what would happen to your business? Would it completely crash and crater because you're not there to man the ship? Then you don't necessarily have the sellable assets in place to be able to have that in that scale. Plus, you're essentially just buying yourself a job at the end of the day.
Yep, that's it. And so that, and you're very early in the business, before there's even spokes, just you. One of the challenges comes in because, like I said earlier, if you're assuming 33% of every dollar coming in goes to labor, but you're a one-person operation, then you're getting paid 3 times normal wages, right? And so if you would normally pay yourself, let's say $90,000 a year, you would pay someone else $90,000 a year. And you build up a business where you're making, let's call it 275, pretty soon you're going to have 275 worth of bills. And now you've got a real problem, because you can't go back to 90 and you don't have the room to hire someone, right? This is, I would say, the second barrier to that process. And there's ways to get around it where you can subcontract stuff. I know guys who got into basically quoting change outs, and then subbing the work, kind of in a one-off way and keeping a margin out of it. But then he's got to make a margin too. And so there's classic potholes. One of them has to do with wages at the beginning, and one of them has to do with that hub and spoke situation.
Sorry, I was just checking something.
Our Facebook group feed went down. So we've lost our Facebook group feed because of StreamYard, and there's a bug between StreamYard and Facebook for the live streaming. So I was just on it. I was making a post in our group to say, hey, we broke our shit. So actually we didn't break anything. Technology's fucked up on us again. So
oh no, too many comments, too many people engaging. That's why.
Yeah. So it's like when we started the show and I didn't press the wrong video. I was like, oh, whoops. But hey, you know what? That happens. We're not perfect. As much as I like to pretend I am, we are not.
No, definitely not. Well, I think this is a great time for our random question generator.
Ooh.
This is one of our favorite parts of the show. We got to throw these in every once in a while just to break the thought pattern sometimes, and often some of the best ideas come out of this. So I'm curious, John, for you, what are some of your own personal rules that you will never break?
Oh, interesting. My own rules that I will never break. I'll never, this is somewhat involuntary, not voluntary, but I'll never have clients that I don't actually care about. Um, I'm too driven by relationships and driven by empathy. And I solve problems because I feel for the people that have the problem. It drives me to learn. It drives me for a lot of ways. And the idea of being like a mercenary consultant, because I've had people call me and say, hey, I need to fire my sales manager and I can't figure out how to do it. So if I pay you, will you come in and fire him for me? I'm like, no, I won't do that. Or, they want me to come in and kind of be this ruthless, we're gonna chop off the bottom 10%. We want you to tell us who they are. No, not do that. Empathy is too important. It's too central. To me, it's really, honestly, empathy is, to me, the core, very inner center core of an air conditioning business. Empathy it drives customer service. What I say to my clients all the time is that if you can't have empathy for 20 people in a hot room who are mad at you and it's not even your fault, if you can't have empathy for them, you shouldn't be in this business. It just is what it is. If you can't have empathy, if you work in the office and you can't have empathy for a guy in 140-degree Fahrenheit, 140-degree attic in July, you shouldn't be in this business. That, or if you can't have empathy for a field supervisor who's getting chewed out by a customer, and it was because somebody else did, and it's he's like a wet noodle now. If you can't have empathy for these people, if you can't have empathy for owners, who owners, it looks like such a cush job, but it so isn't. And so if you can't have empathy for owners and their issues, you definitely shouldn't be in my business. And so, to me, I just a rule, and I say it's a rule, but the reality is, it would either they or I would cut it off quickly anyway. I mean, it wouldn't. It just doesn't work otherwise.
Well, it's interesting to me. It comes back to the culture conversation we had at the beginning, where it's clear what the culture of your organization is all about. And having empathy for one another. And I mean, for those that don't understand, sympathy is feeling sorry for someone. Empathy is putting yourself in their shoes and experiencing what they're experiencing, feeling what they're feeling, and then having compassion for that. So it is at the core of every successful business.
Yep, absolutely.
And every business owner, at the end of the day, you're a firefighter.
Yeah. I'll tell you. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, everything stops with you, right? Everything that happens in your organization that goes wrong, it's your fault. And when everything goes right, it's because of the people that are around you.
Yeah, that's right.
It's almost like being a mother. It is a thankless job.
I'll tell you a characteristic of some of the best leaders that I've seen. They can do two things and be okay with it. They can create a very clear expectation that's a burden on someone who works for them. And then they can use empathy to help them be successful, even though they know they created the burden. Right? The way I say that with my clients is, I'm in charge, but you're more important than me. If you're going to be a leader, this is, by the way, number 2 on the list, bring your authority into your relationships. Too many managers and business owners try to build a relationship, quote unquote, by going out for beers after work. And then, but it's like they're pretending they're not the boss over there. And then they come back to work and now they got to be the boss again. And it's like they put money in an account after hours and they spend it down back at work. Right. And instead, it builds a relationship with no authority. So instead, if you want to build a good relationship with someone who reports to you, determine it, think about it. What's something I want to clearly expect of them? It's black and white. It either happened or it didn't. And, ideally it's something that's bothering you and it isn't bothering them, right? I call this push the pain down. And put that burden on them, give them a deadline, create the expectation, but then stay with them and you let them feel you using your authority to make them successful. Giving them resources, giving them resources or clearing the path or whatever it is, so that they have the feeling that, wow, this person, they're going to use this thing for me and not against me, right? And you can't do that without empathy. And you also can't do that without creating a burden. And so the kind of cognitive dissonance that comes from that, the greatest leaders are people who are able to get over that cognitive dissonance, create those, push them in the water and then help them back out. Create the burden. And, again, start with the stuff that is frustrating you and it isn't frustrating them. And get to where now it's frustrating them and it isn't frustrating you. So now you're freed up to use your empathy to help them be successful, right? And that's what it means to bring your authority into your relationships.
I love that. You want to pull people to success, not push them.
That's right. That's right.
Well, and you talk about empathy and building your culture on that itself it's taking care of your people the right way, doing things the right way for everyone involved in your organization and building that. But it's but it's also not necessarily being tough, and you can probably speak a lot more to that. What's the difference in terms of being empathy and caring for your people? I guess the toughness and strength, they're different, right? How does that relate in terms of, okay, you want to care for your people, you want to make sure that you as you said, push them in the water but pull them back out. How do you do that the right way?
Yeah, well, in a lot of any craft labor kind of business, it's tends to be male dominated. And there's a few people that kind of want to be the alpha, and there's a little bit of a push shove kind of dynamic. In all my client sites, the older techs talk about how the younger techs are softer than we used to be. There's a kind of toughness mentality, but that's not the basis for a culture. A little bit of that is, it just comes with the testosterone. But for the most part, a great culture is based around solving problems. You solve customer problems, you solve technician problems. Culture goes bad when you say, so that's not my problem, that's your problem, right? And so empathy and solving problems go together. Like I said earlier, if you want to get paid to solve a problem with no empathy, you're just a mercenary. And so when the dispatcher is trying to solve a problem for the technician with empathy, a great culture. When the people in the back office are patiently getting the rest of the stuff they needed on a service report, and it didn't happen, when it was brought in the first time, and they don't call out and be like, "What's your blah, blah problem?" And when it's like, okay, and when the technician says, "Okay, I created a problem for her, I have empathy for her," all of it all just keeps coming back to empathy. All of that does not mean there's no strength, right? You can be a very powerful person. You can be a person of high character. You can be a person that can endure a lot, who's very resilient. None of that is the opposite of empathy. Empathy is not weakness. And so there's a certain, frankly, a certain weakness that goes into trying to be the tough guy. What's that really about? And so being able to just kind of find that middle space where, I'm comfortable with myself having empathy for somebody, but it doesn't mean I'm codependent either. It doesn't mean I can't hand somebody a very large invoice and feel just fine about it. It doesn't mean I at some point, if I have to let somebody go, usually that's out of empathy also, because they're failing. I don't know how else to help them. So it's the best thing for everybody. They don't want to go to work every day knowing they're failing. And if I don't know what to do with them, then I need to cut them loose.
And that's 100%. And you look at, okay, now you're the leader. You've done that. You've put those places, those building blocks in place. You've talked about the culture. You've created empathy. You've had your team doing that. How do you then train your supervisors and your management staff? Because if the ultimate goal is to replace yourself and remove yourself from your business, how do you train your people to do exactly what you just said?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about manager and supervisor communication a little bit. Let's start with the issue of data versus judgment. Managers and supervisors have to know how to talk about status. Right? Well, this will sound far from empathy, but it's actually not. So if I say it's 80 degrees outside, that's data. If I say it's hot outside, that's a judgment. That makes sense?
Yep.
If I say that room has been hot for 3 hours, that's data. If I say that room has been hot too long, that's a judgment, right? Status requires data. He's an idiot is not data. It's not status, right? That customer's a loser. That's not status, right? We're working on it, not status. We're working our butts off out here, not status, right? Managers have to know how to communicate with data exactly what's going on. Now, there's a lot of data available these days because it's just the way data works in life. And so you kind of have to have some understanding of what data is the important stuff. But the worst thing a manager can go to the general manager or an owner and say is, I got it. That's not status. That's good. That owner's going to dive right in there and say, oh, I don't know if you do. Let's check it out. Okay. So communicating status using data with regard to employee performance combined with empathy is going to create a high performing person, right? That if you have empathy, but you give feedback using data. So I give feedback that's something like, hey, can I give you some feedback? Sure. So when you're late 4 days in a row, here's what happened. I start forming the judgment that you don't care. So how can we do this differently? Right? That kind of feedback will transform an employee, especially if there's empathy with it. If the feedback is, you know what, you're late all the time, I'm sick of it. Are you lazy or what? No data in that. There's nothing really actionable there other than to just try harder or whatever. Okay. So using data versus judgment is the starting point. Now, next communication piece. If you think of extroverts and introverts, I mean, these are common concepts in our world. Extroverts, is gregarious, boisterous, a lot of words, verbal, high volume. Introverts, quieter, fewer words, more likely in the corner kind of thing, right? So an extrovert in their communication style starts talking to decide what they want to say, right? And they may say 7 things, and at number 5, they hear themselves say the thing they're trying to say, and they go, yes, that's what I'm trying to say. And they feel total clarity, right? But the other person hasn't had that moment. And so they're saying, how could I have not, this is as clear as you couldn't be more clear than that. But it's because they had a feeling when they said it, right? The other person just heard 7 things. They don't know for sure which one was the one, okay? So the introvert, on the other hand, usually doesn't speak until their entire thought is formed. And so this creates a silence problem in communication, right? So, and it could be as little as 7 seconds. But 7 seconds of silence for an introvert, it's not that much. 7 seconds of silence for an extrovert is like somebody's pounding a nail right into their forehead, right?
My biggest thing that I needed to learn when in sales was how to shut my mouth.
That's it. That's it right there. And if you're aware of it, it's way easier to manage, right? But if you're not aware of it, what happens is just because of the nature of how organizations are, when people are promoted, given more authority and more problems they have to solve, they become more extrovert, just forced by the organization, not on purpose. It's just a nature. So, you have a meeting where the manager comes in and you got 3 texts there, and the manager says, so I think this is where we should go with this customer. What do you guys think? Because I really think that if we do that, then we're going to be able to do this with them as well, because we want to do both of these with them. Isn't that a good idea? Pause. So really, don't you think we should do this? And at this point, they're like, okay. And he says, I knew I was right. I'm so glad I have your support. Thank you so much. And he walks out the room. Right? Now, they're sitting there going, hope this works. But they're the ones who are supposed to make it work.
Right.
Right? That's a silence-driven problem. Okay. So after we've talked about data and judgment, we have to talk about the management of silence. Silence is in communication, whoever's managing the silence is managing the communication. And I first learned this from, I'm going to forget his name, but is a reporter that was part of the Watergate group, and he writes novels on U.S. presidents for every president. And an interviewer asked him, how do you get this stuff out of people? How do you get them to tell you this stuff? Like, other people write books about the president, they don't get this stuff. And he said, silence. He said, I just ask them a question and sit there and stare at them until they tell me. And then the interviewer said, where did you learn? And he said, from somebody in the CIA, because they use it for interrogation. Silence, right? So silence will produce words. So one of the ways I teach managers, if they feel like, oh, we got something's going on down at the Shell plant, and I don't know, I'm smelling it, but I don't know what's going on. I teach them, bring in the supervisor and just go, so the Shell plant. And just wait. Don't say anything. Pretty soon they'll break and be like, well, you probably know about this. We had some follow-ups. We didn't bring them in right away. And okay. So if you're managing the silence, you're managing the communication. So as a manager, you have to be able to intentionally not speak. And not to some degree for the purpose of listening, but in part, the vast majority of technicians are introverts. In my work, it's over 80%. And so if you've got a workforce full of introverts, you don't realize how many people are like, well, I don't think this is a good idea, but I'm not the boss. And so, okay, we'll see how it goes. I mean, that managing silence gets you through that issue. And then thirdly, the third part of this communication piece is managing urgency.
Right.
Okay. So this is, you got 20 people in a hot room, you got a junior tech and you got a senior tech on scene. And the senior tech could fix this in 5 minutes. For the junior tech, it's going to take half an hour. Okay. So we have a decision to make. If we're going to use this time to train that junior tech, that supervisor has got to manage the urgency that's created by watching someone do it more slowly than they could do it. Right? The management of urgency, and what we'll say is, oh, I don't have time for this. But that's not talking about minutes at that point. I don't have enough minutes. They're saying this is more urgency than I'm willing to tolerate in this moment. So it's just the same as if you were a dad teaching your son to fish, and now it's his turn to tie the lures, right? You got to be able to tolerate and not be like, Dad, give me that thing, right? If you're going to communicate well as a manager, you got to use data versus judgment in your status communication. You got to manage your silence. You got to manage your urgency, all on purpose.
There's a lot to unpack there.
I don't even know where to begin.
Well, I got a couple of thoughts. One of them that came up for me when talking about the introvert versus extrovert. And you see this all the time. Actually, a close friend of mine, it happens in his relationship, in his marriage, where he is an introvert. She asks him a question. He's processing his answer, or processing, depending on where you're from. And he's pausing, he's thinking, and then she snaps at him. Are you even listening to me?
That's it. Yep. There you go.
Right?
That's exactly it. Yep.
Happens all the time in relationships, in romantic relationships, in work relationships. You see it all the time, and all they're doing is thinking. In sales, it is the worst thing you can do. It will kill a sale 10 times out of 10. First real sales job I had in the training manual, after the question that you asked them if they wanted to buy, our manager made us write out "shut up" in big bold letters. And it was right in the manual. That was what we were supposed to do, was just shut up and wait. First person to talk. I mean, in court and law and things like that, that's what they teach. First person to talk usually loses. So let them speak. Just sit there and wait. Silence doesn't mean success, right? Shut up, let them answer, give them the time to process, and let them formulate their thought and come back to it. I love that. And then managing.
I can't tell you how important that is to remember when it comes to a technical workforce.
Yeah.
Because if you've got extroverted managers and 80% of your technicians are introverted,
yep.
I mean, that dynamic you just talked about with the husband and the wife, you can really hurt your culture a lot over not understanding exactly this issue.
Yep.
Because their judgment forms, it's like, oh, those people don't care. They just stare at me. That's not what's happening.
It's not it at all. And that's actually this friend of mine. He's moving into more of a coaching role himself, and getting into different assessments and personality assessments. And so, um, it's phenomenal to watch his now understanding of their dynamic and how much it's changed their relationship, but how he's impacting others now too, and moving into family coaching and business coaching. And I mean, there's so many cool different assessments that you can do out there, but I'm a huge fan of the Gallup one. If you can do that with your organizations, it's phenomenal in moving the needle and understanding your people and how they operate and how they communicate.
But not just your people, you as well as a
Oh
person and
yeah,
how you communicate. Like when I
totally.
went through that Gallup strength, and like I'm a steamroller. I just want to like I I will I see people bigger and better than they see themselves, and I will steamroll them to get them there.
Mhm.
And like
Yeah.
when I learned that, it's just like, oh, that's why I had some conflict with some people when I was managing them, because it's like not everybody thinks like me, and it's just like it's an eye opening for yourself. So now, when you're aware of how both your people are and how you are, you can communicate and have more effective conversations with them to be able to move your business forward. It's a powerful, powerful, powerful piece. So, um, as we start to wrap things up, we have, I believe, covered all 9 topics, rather. Our 10th one is coming up, and in some way, shape, or form, we have covered all 10 once I ask this question. So the last one, we're talked,
Well, before we get to that, do you want to drop the links?
yeah, we can do that.
All right.
All right. So we should have did that a little bit earlier, but of course, if you want to find John, let me switch over to the banners here. And we're also having technical difficulties today. So my feed has now dropped from my live feed. It has dropped from our group's feed. Evan, you're the only one still standing. So
Last one.
either way,
boys.
Technical difficulties. We'll repost it later. So to find John, you can get in touch with him at the Operations Laboratory, as some people call it, .com. Operations, and when you actually read it, it's laboratory, but Operations Laboratory .com. Of course, we'll put these in the show notes in case you can't take my butchering of the word laboratory. John at johnpsherk.com. And of course, on LinkedIn, that is a long URL. But just search John Sherk and that will come up. But we'll put the direct URL back in the bottom of the show notes. So, build personal margins to improve your business margins. Yeah. What do you mean by that?
This was one I didn't learn. I learned this by observation, not by kind of research. I watched business owners and their relationship. When I say personal margins, I'm saying inside of me, do I have enough time, energy, love, confidence? Do I is there some of me left at the end of the day, or is it like I am taking everything I've got to get through every day, right? That's not having an inner margin. But if I've got ample inner resources, somehow there's some magical connection, and I'm sure it could be analyzed more than I have, but there's some magical connection between that dynamic and the business's margins. Because I've watched it happen over and over again. They affect each other. I watch a guy who's got no personal margins begin to make decisions too fast and then walk away from them too quickly because he needs results too quickly. I watched them hire someone, expect them to add value back in a week. So this isn't the right one, they're fired. And having no personal margins directly impedes getting margins in the business. And so I coach people as a strategy to improve your business margins, figure out how to get personal margins going in your life. There's a lot of people that they'll mentally do a kind of Faustian deal with the devil, where they'll say, I don't need personal margins as long as I'm making money, right? The problem is you'll stop making money if you don't have the inner margins. And so for some, it makes me think of a client I had about 5 years ago. Young guy, started a business, he had about 10 people working for him. He was doing great on sort of the surface. And I went out with him and had a drink and a cigar, and he was a mess. And I said, well, tell me about your numbers. And essentially what he was doing was making up for all these people who were not making him money.
Mm.
And so we had to go through a process one by one and, just change people out. And then I watched him at every time he let go of the burden because he's a young guy. He hired all his friends, so every time he released the burden of having to carry that person who was not pulling their weight, I saw him have a little bit more inner margin, a little bit more, a little bit more. Year later, way happier, meets the girl of his dreams, gets married. Now she's pregnant. He's happy as a clam, and the margins have never been better. Right? So if you want it, this kind of comes back to this toughness thing we were talking about earlier. If you want, you're not going to have great financial margins in your business if you don't have personal margins yourself. You will find a way to make those business margins disappear.
Yep. Hard to smell like a rose when you're rolling around a pile of shit. And you see it all the time, right? If you don't get your house in order, your mental house, your emotional house, your spiritual house, whatever that is for you, if you don't clear the air there, there's no room for business success.
Yep, that's right. Well, and it's not even no room. It's unconsciously, we all kind of, every time when we wake up in the morning, we all kind of look at ourselves in the mirror and we say, unconsciously, we say, let's say I'm a 6. Everything that's we kind of, equilibrium for us is everything that's a 6, right? So if it's a 5, I know what to do with that. I can raise that up. If 7 walks up, I got a decision to make. It's either I'm going to pull that back down to 6 or I'm going to have to go up to 7.
Yep.
So if you're walking around with no inner margins, the process of destroying your company's margins is unconscious. It's not like you'll walk in and go, I don't want any money. You'll just make decisions that lead that direction because now you're at equilibrium.
Yep. You will self-sabotage. Absolutely. And that's
100%.
T. Harv Eker talks about that in The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. It was one of the first personal development books that I read where he used the reference of a thermostat, right? Your financial aptitude, your financial capabilities is the equivalent of a thermostat in a room. If it gets too hot in there, right? Somebody opens the door in the middle of summer, it gets too hot in the house. What happens? The AC kicks on, brings it back down, right? Yeah. You open a window in the middle of winter, it gets too cold in there, furnace kicks on, heats it back up, right? You will always find a way to get back to your baseline.
That's it. That's exactly it.
Yeah. I love that.
Yep.
Amazing. Well, is there anything else that we have not covered yet? That
just make sure everybody knows, if you go to my website, it's a free book there for you, free ebook, invitation into a free private group room and on Facebook. What do we call those? Private groups on Facebook. Yeah.
I'd say Facebook group. Yeah. It's either public or private. That only allows people to either see or not see your posts in your members unless they join.
Okay.
That's the difference. Yeah.
Yeah. We just got it started. So there's only a handful in there, but come on in. I'm posting content almost every day and get a chance to get to know each other that way too. And there's also, if you go to my website on the pop-up where the book is, there's a link that goes straight to my calendar. And if you feel like, man, John, I really would like to talk to you more, please feel free. Click on that, pick an available time on the calendar, and we'll sit down on a Zoom call and talk.
Love it. And I highly encourage it. John is a wealth of knowledge. If you haven't picked up on that already today, he's got short snippets too on YouTube. That's where I started following some of your content. Quick 2-3 minute videos, and it just gets you thinking. It gets you your mind right, gets you put a different perspective and a different spin on things. We're heading into summer here where things are going to get a little nuts. Things are going to get crazy at times. And that is the moment where you need to stop and think and start thinking about what systems you can put in place so that shit doesn't hit the fan next year. That's what takes you from being an owner operator into becoming the manager business owner. Is when you start taking a look at those processes and really reevaluating your own business, and then doing what John said and getting that third party to come in and reevaluate it as well and put a real business evaluation on it. So this has been wonderful.
Cool. One last question.
Yep.
What is one question you wished people asked you more but don't?
Oh, wow. What is one question? See, you're seeing my introverted side right now. Yep. What is one question people ask you more but don't?
You wished people asked you more but don't.
I wish more people asked me how awesome the University of Notre Dame is.
Hmm.
That's because I've got a lot of thoughts on that topic, and no one ever asks.
Well, how awesome do you think the University of Notre Dame is?
It's friggin' spectacular.
What
You
makes
want to
it?
talk about
What
culture? That is a one hell of a culture.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, the reason is that not to be, I'm being cavalier about it, but it really changed my life. I did a master's degree there, and I grew up very poor, very country. You know, our house growing up, my parents put 2 used house trailers, just kind of smashed them together and held it together with 2x12s. And I mean, it was really like bad. You know, I used to tell people we weren't white trash, but you could sure see it from there. And um, I ended up getting an academic scholarship to do a master's degree at Notre Dame. And I had just felt small time before that. I got into a classroom there and I'm like, there's people from all over the world here and I'm competing with these people. This is, so maybe it's talking about your number going up. I'm like, oh, I'm not that. And even though the content was very little to do with what I do now, I was studying theology and ancient languages. It was that being on the campus and realizing I'm part of this totally changed my life. So.
No. Well, and you say you people from all over the world. It's almost like a David and Goliath, big fish, little pond, little fish, big pond scenario there, and it's a really eye-opening experience when you're able to experience that sort of a thing in something like that. And if you take it and learn from it the right way, it makes you stronger and a bigger person to be able to take advantage of that down the road. So always good to have those experiences. Well, John, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to chat with 2 crazy Canadians up here in lovely Canada. And of course, if you want to find and get in touch with John, we have all the links at the bottom of the show. So until next time.
All
cheers.
right. Cheers, Jim.
Cheers.
Hey, thanks for watching another episode of HVAC Success Secrets Revealed. Before you go, join our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/HVAC Revealed. That URL one more time, facebook.com/groups/HVAC Revealed. The other thing, if you took one little golden nugget of information from this show, no matter how big, no matter how small, what we ask is you introduce this show to one person in your contacts list. That's it. That's all we ask. Introduce it to one person in your contacts list so they too can unleash the ultimate HVAC business. Until next time, cheers.